Greetings, brothers and sisters. Gonna get to some epic comments, like 10 or 15 of them. It's a 4th of July extravaganza here. I'm starting this, right now it's July 3rd, so I'm doing this ahead of time. My wife and I completed listening to the Joe Rogan interview with RFK, and I got all these comments I wanted to address. First, I just want to talk a little bit about Independence Day. And so my old family, we used to celebrate Interdependence Day, which is, depend on God within, which is a part of the Sajmarg tradition. Instead of Independence Day, it was be interdependent, be dependent on your soul and your internal connection to God, which is, a good way of looking at it. And my ex had a good idea, like she had good ideas. She also had sort of a visionary personality. And even though she was a disaster in so many ways, and I've talked about this on this channel quite a bit in different places, but she did have some quality ideas. And one of the ideas was to do something to be independent of the system every year, like on 4th of July. And we really didn't follow through because, it was a good idea, but we really didn't do it. And I told my now wife about it. I said this was actually a good idea that she had, and she said, yeah, this is a good idea. And so my wife and I are going to make some bone sauce today, which is something you put on, fruit trees and things. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And we're going to do a bunch of other activities and things on the farm as a way of being more independent. And we're, committed to growing at some point in the future as much of our food as possible on our farm, and getting rid of the dependence on corporate farming, corporate, food suppliers and all these things. We have to read the ingredients, and even if you do that, you never know. For the most part, I don't like fireworks. I've had some good experiences watching fireworks, but most of them are not good experiences. The crowds I don't like, the parking, getting in and out of the, wherever you're going, the smell of gunpowder, and just all of it. Right? So being out late at night and things like this. So I don't really love it. I've seen fireworks a few times where, it was a good experience. It was like something great. Over the water or something, I think, where there was, anyway. But I'm not really into the 4th of July. I'm not a, patriotic person. I think this is a, evil empire we have here. I'm grateful to be American and, in various ways. So there's that. But, I like the history. There's times I get, sentimental or things that I, we grew up hearing the stories of the American heroes and the, America. And there's things, once in a while. But it's not a big thing for me. But doing these other activities is, and, it's going to be a slow day today because most people will be engaged with their family. So there's usually less views and things like this. People are outside, and, there's so it's going to be this video today. But this is, to me, going to be an epic video. So the title of this video, unless I forget tomorrow, because that could happen, I'm not sure I'm going to complete this whole video today. I don't know if I'll get through everything. It's almost dinner time. But anyways, I'm starting it here. And as of right now, the title is RFK is a truther. This is to respond to comments. And Trump is a Tino, like he calls Rhino Republicans in name only. Trump is a truther in name only. Trump is a truther wannabe. We've seen this play out, and he's, an absolute joke. And please don't comment until you've heard what I have to say about this. I got a lot of comments I'm going to read, and almost all of them are comments. There are times in life where you're talking to somebody who knows so much more about what you're talking about, right? You meet someone, you're at a party or something, a social event, maybe at somebody at work or something like this, and they bring up a subject a little bit about, right? That they're, this is their passion. They grew up with it. It's something they know so much more than you do. But for whatever reason, you try to tell them their business, right? And this goes on quite a bit on the internet. you have a lot of people who are either stupid about the subject they're talking about, they're ignorant of it, or their knowledge base is skewed in some way. Me and my wife started listening to the interview with. We were in the car today because we wanted to get a bunch of things we needed before the 4th. So we go into these stores. It's crowded. It's a day I usually I don't go shopping like on Black Friday or any of these days before a holiday. I just avoid stores, but we had to do it, right? And we were finishing up the interview with Joe Rogan and RFK, and we'd heard about the interview with Bill Maher and RFK, and I forgot exactly how much Bill Maher is unlikable, right? Like what a disaster he was. It really made me appreciate Joe Rogan as an interviewer and why he has such a better following, because Bill Maher just was talking out of his boop, right? He was just talking just stupid stuff. And Bill Maher is starting to lean away from liberalism, as is JFK even more so, and RFK even more so, RFK Jr. And Bill Maher was saying things that I kind of agree with, but then he was just saying stupid things and telling RFK his business. And RFK had said in the Joe Rogan show that he didn't want to talk about the boop, like he wasn't going to campaign on that. That wasn't going to be a big issue for him. And he only talks about when people ask him about it. And nobody wants to debate him. He was, they got into this thing where that Peter Hotez, right? So they were talking about that, Peter Hotez, and Joe Rogan was talking about how Peter Hotez is an obese dude who doesn't eat any health food. I said this before, right? There are things that they know reduce your immune system. Having a belly, if you're a man, reduces your, belly fat, and a man usually indicates low testosterone. And men get older, they get belly fat, and their testosterone level goes down, and their immune system takes a huge hit. And then he eats all this junk food, and yet he's pushing the bloop, right? And so, the guy's just kind of an idiot, right? And he said, that he was downgrading RFK. I guess this is what he was responding to the show. And RFK said no one's debated him in 18 years on this subject. They won't debate him because they're like, well, he's a skilled lawyer and all these things. Good debater, or they feel like they'll get embarrassed. But the main reason is that they don't want, they don't have the scientific studies to back up what he has. Like he has the info that can crush their arguments, and they can't produce it. It happened with Fauci. It happened with all these other people. And so he was supposed to debate these guys. I think it was from Yale, some university. And first it was going to be one-on-one, and they were going to split the time. And then they call him and say, well, now there's going to be 2 against 1, and you're going to have to split the time with them, right? And then they call him back and say, well, now it's going to be 4 against 1 or 5 against 1. I think it was 4 against 1. And you're all going to get 6 minutes. He goes, that's all I need. He goes, that's not fair, but that's all I need. All he needed was 6 minutes to get his point of view out there. And he shows up. He said he had to take a red-eye flight out there. It was like California or something. I don't know what it was. Yale, I don't, whatever. I don't have the whole story. But he shows up, and there are 4 empty chairs. And I thought that would be a good, slogan for the guy, right? 4 empty chairs, right? The guys didn't show. And so nobody really wants to debate him. So my wife and I have just listened to this. And he told a couple of interesting stories about his family and the beginning of the Bill Maher show interview. Then Bill Maher just starts talking and running his mouth and, just being stupid, like just completely talking out of his boop. And then Bill Maher talks about they start talking about the boop, right, and the COVID thing. And Bill Maher says, well, you shouldn't be talking about this. It's very controversial because Bill Maher is also a boop skeptic. At least he claims to be, right? But he's saying, these are the questions you're going to have to answer. And he says, well, I don't talk about this. It's not part of my platform. And Bill Maher says, well, you're going to have to talk about it. Everywhere you go, they're going to ask you about this, right? And that's just stupid because that's not how they roll with something like this. They don't want to debate him. Now, Joe Biden is being a complete P word. He won't debate him. Joe Biden won't debate RFK Jr. And he's bowing out of the New Hampshire primary because he's going to lose that one. RFK has a legitimate chance to beat Joe Biden. And I'm going to tell you why and how it would work. And again, I don't believe in the political system. And I believe that the system should and will collapse inevitably under its own depravity. And nobody's going to save it. And I said that in the beginning of the video because I've gotten some puzzling questions because I have a lot of dumbasses here, obviously. I mean, many of the comments were great, or at least, they were good in terms of understanding what I'm saying. And I don't care if you disagree with me. You don't tell me because I don't want to know about it. You don't have to tell me. I don't need to know that you disagree because, you're going to disagree on some things. And I've said this over and over again. I'm not wanting clones. I want you guys to think for yourselves, just have your own opinions. I'm not, I don't want people just to take on my opinions. That's not the point of my YouTube channel. And if you disagree with me, you don't have to tell me about it because I'm not interested in your opinion. I'm just not. I get thousands of comments. I've had, over 1 million comments here at least. God knows, millions of comments maybe even. So lifetime for this channel, and again, I've deleted videos, some of my videos that had millions of views. I had a video that had 2 million views, for example, that's now deleted. And other videos that have been privatized, but the ones I've deleted. So I have 113 million views on just this channel alone, and over a long span of time, and some of those views aren't being counted. And so I think it's about 10 or 20% of the people leave comments. So 10%, that's over 10 million people, 20% over 20 million people. So 20 million comments, right? So I get a lot of comments. So, I'm not interested in hearing everybody's opinion about something I've already forgot about and probably don't care about myself, right? And so, it's not an insult to anybody, but I don't care. But, people have I got to tell you that I disagree with you. Well, I didn't ask you to tell me. I mean, I'm not here for that, right? And I simply don't have the time for that, right? But anyway, going back to this Bill Maher thing, because it feeds into this comment thing. But it's already been established in earlier interviews, which I assume Bill Maher listened to, about RFK. And, if he didn't, he sucks. I mean, he's just again, talking out of his ass. But that people don't want to debate him on this because he knows more. And that the official story is just wrong on this and so many other things. And they don't want to confront or be confronted by that information. We know this, all of us know this in the truth community. We see it over and over again. What they want to do is, without us having a platform, they want to deplatform us, and then they want to define you and profile you and make up some ridiculous position where you can't, explain that's just a lie and false. In fact, Bill Maher, just before that, was reading a New York Times article, and he was ripping it to shreds and saying that the stuff that they were saying about new RFK was completely bogus, right? He was saying they're doing all these hit pieces because they don't want you to speak for yourself. They don't want people to hear you. They don't want people to hear your voice or hear your thought process. That's why they're not debating him. Joe Biden isn't debating him. They want to talk about RFK being some crazy conspiracy theorist, anti-boop, right? Without him explaining his own position. And so Bill Maher saying this to him, that, they're going to make you talk about it, is wrong and ignorant. He's telling this guy how to run his campaign, right? Because, he's a kind of a comedian. And he's been on TV and he thinks he's very arrogant, right? And many of you share this quality with him. I've been in this position before where I'm talking to somebody and I know the person knows more about the subject I'm talking about and I'm forced to talk about it for some reason, or I'm just, looking like an idiot, right? I mean, I can feel it because I know the person knows more than me. And I'm like, stop talking. Why are you telling this person, you know? And so I'm doing you a favor here. And I'm not, for those of you who I'm reading your comments, and not because I like you or I'm actually a good person or I'm trying to help out you and not really, well, you and also the people that are around you, the people you're going to meet in the future because, maybe you're not aware, you don't have any self-awareness. Like, I'm not doing it for that reason, but it's a hidden benefit. Like, it's a side effect that if you actually listen to this and realized what a complete dumbass you are for saying dumb things without knowing, what's going on with your limited lens in which you view reality and maybe your limited IQ or whatever you have. Like, I don't know what you're good at or what you're smart at. Everyone has their abilities, but it isn't commenting on YouTube. Like, if you think you're doing the world a service by commenting on YouTube or you think you're good at it, you're not. And you could spare the rest of us. I mean, I would say 90% of the comments on YouTube, certainly, I think I get a lot of good commenters on my channel, but there are just so many dumbasses, angry, hateful, limited people, emotionally twisted, psychologically twisted, commenting and just putting out like garbage that's nobody needs to read and hear about, filled with negative information and negative energy and just, stupidity. And so I'm helping you out here for those of you who left comments. So there's one that just came in. Let's get to that one first. Because I think right now there's 9 of them. Maybe more. There might be more later. I had a little computer thing there, but now I'm back. All right, here it is. First one. The Kennedys are puppets just like every other politician. Put your faith in God. Now, what would make you leave this comment? What I was saying had nothing to do with putting my faith in the Kennedys. If you listen to my video and you listen to any of my videos, you would know that I am not a person who votes. I don't believe, I believe in the left-right paradigm. And I say all the time that you can have, you can be a slave to any number of human, whatever it is, institutions or money or alcohol. You can be a slave to all kinds of bad things, or you can be a slave to God. Your position here on earth is slavery. And if you don't understand that, I'm not going to explain that to you here. But it's better to be a slave to God because at least you'll be doing good and your life will be worth something. And, God is the best master. You're going to have a master, might as well be God, right? In one way or another. You're going to have a master by choice or by, force. And the masters that you're going to get by force are not good, right? So the master by choice is God. And so, that is what it is. But this person saying this, why would you even, why are you commenting? Why would you say that? Like, it has no bearing on what I said in the video. And I'm going to get into what I said in the video, but there's other dumbass comments I want to get to, so I'm going to work my way through this. And so it says here, sadly, RFK Jr. is not his father or his uncle. No, I think he's actually better. And I'll get into that in a moment. And, this is something that you think is, I don't know what the person's reasoning was there, but this is what he said here. This other person, the new comment. RFK is a Kennedy, hardly a truther. Still, I enjoy your videos. Also, RFK sounds as if he has syphilis of the throat. Disgusting. The only political place to be involved with your local offices, your sheriff or important person to know well. Okay, so this guy missed the entire point of my video. And I want to address the voice thing first. Because the voice thing sucks. RFK has a disease, and you can Google it. You can search for it because he was asked this at a recent town hall. And he said he had a very powerful speaking voice, so much so that he would give speeches to people, with like places with audiences, like an auditorium, and he didn't need a microphone because his voice was that powerful. But after a while, his voice would start to shake, or he had, I don't know, vibrato or something. And people would write to him and said he had this disease, he needs to get checked out. And it turns out he did have that disease, and it got so bad he could barely speak. But he's gone to Spain, and he got this, maybe Spain or someplace, I don't know. And they had a specialist there, and they did an operation, and it's better than it was. But he says, he feels bad for people who have to listen to him speak, and he can't listen to himself. Like he dislikes his own voice, right? Which, he's a sincere person, so I believe what he says about these things. He seems very sincere. I can say I found it hard to listen to him in the beginning, but now I barely notice it. Now that I've listened to him for a while, I can see where it's a deficit, but he's soldiering through it, right? There are days where I have to clear my throat. I talk every day for, over an hour or more, maybe probably with, edits and things, hour and a half. And, then I talk with my wife, I talk outside of this YouTube channel. And sometimes I have issues with my voice, usually in the morning. Sometimes I'm coughing, I edit all this stuff out. But, it's sometimes I have a lot to say and my voice isn't cooperating. I know it must be really bad for singers and people, right? So this is, I appreciate the effort, because the days that I'm struggling with my voice, it takes twice as much energy for me to get through this stuff. Like it's brutal. It's draining. And so I would imagine that, he knows he's struggling, and he has an, impaired, he's like a handicap now, right? But he still goes out and he does it, and he's, and that's a credit to him. And his mind is brilliant. He's a very smart guy. But the main thing I want to talk about here is, and I want to compare this to Trump too in a moment, him saying that he's a Kennedy and not a truther. It's such a dumbass comment and so ignorant and in all ways, because the Kennedys were so much truthers that two of them were murdered, right? At least two of them. Okay, so there's an older brother, Joe, and I watched this movie when I was a kid, Joseph the Forgotten Kennedy. And he told a story, I think it was Joe Rogan, I think it was with Bill Maher. And his uncle Joe Kennedy, who died in World War II. And I'd seen the movie, I knew he died in a plane. And he was a hero, an airplane pilot. He was a fighter pilot. And he flew all these missions. And he had flown enough that he could get out of the military. So he had been done with the military. And he was asked to fly one last dangerous mission, in which he was taking a plane loaded with bombs. It was like a giant bomb. And he was going to fly it over to wherever it was, someplace in Europe, where the Germans had these submarines. And he was going to parachute out, and they had a plane following it, like this was a primitive drone, and they had a plane following it that had a remote control, and were going to detonate these bombs and fly the plane into these submarines. Like, they needed him to fly it for a certain level, and then they could detonate it, right? He said that they needed a pilot for the plane to take off. They couldn't do all those sorts of things, right? 1940s or whatever it was. So they were up in the air, and they turned on the remote control mechanism, and that triggered the bomb. The bomb blew up, and Joseph Kennedy was never seen again. He was obliterated over the Atlantic Ocean. And he said his grandfather, the father of JFK, I guess this guy was maybe sort of a criminal. I don't know. I kind of remember the movie a little bit. But he loved Joseph as his oldest son, and he was the golden child. He thought he was going to become president. And anytime anybody mentioned his name from that day until he died, the grandfather died, he would weep. This tragedy, right? So there were 3 Kennedy sons, Joseph, John, and Robert, all dead, right? And in, tragic ways. But 2 of them were assassinated by the CIA, by the intelligence community. So think, as a truther, the intelligence community is probably the number one enemy of the truth community. Wouldn't you agree with that? The intelligence community is, one of the biggest problems in terms of the truth community. And most of you agree with that. And if not the biggest, it's one of the top 5, depending on your point of view. So if you're a truther and you are, and somehow at odds with the intelligence community, how many of you have been assassinated for that, right? How many of you have been assassinated for spreading your brilliant truth with your wonderful comments or your wonderful videos and your wonderful truther things that you're saying out there, criticizing the powers that be, have been assassinated or even, come close to something like that? 2 of the Kennedys were for being truthers. And this is back when the right wing and the conservative movement, and this is a problem in the truth community, and it's just, I'm very conscious of it now, how bad the right-wing truthers suck. You got to shed your right-wing Republican BS to be a real truther. I've talked about this. And you're not getting it, or, you wouldn't be commenting here. At least understanding my position, whether you agree with it or not, I don't care. But, it's like you can't really deny it because it's there, right? It's the same stuff that he was talking about, these guys who don't want to debate him because, they don't, and they're scared of the truth, right? They're covering up the truth. They know what the truth is, and they know he knows, and he can present it in a way that they can't argue against it, right? And so the right wing, the conservative right wing, the warmongering right wing, the far-right Christian coalition, these people, they really sucked. And I grew up in this era. Okay, so I just got a call from my Google ad consultant. Right? I'm running ads on YouTube. It's been a disaster, so I've been covering it here. And I got it on tape. The guy actually said to me, I had all these videos that were recommended. I'm just saying this. I'm thinking of, and hopefully I'll make this video today, but it'll be out tomorrow otherwise. But many of you know I asked my audience to give me YouTube channels that they also watch that they thought would be a good place for me to run ads. So as a focus group, you couldn't get any better than that. And YouTube, Google Ads has a function where I could put these channels in to request that they run my ad on these channels. And they haven't done it once since. That was like 3 weeks ago. And I, was talking to the guy, and I got him to admit that they have no control over it. It's completely, you can hear it. It's an epic conversation, kind of funny. And the guy is great. Like, I don't have a problem with the guy. So this, that's coming tomorrow. And I actually talked about this on my other channel. I was talking about this just right before I did this voiceover, because I was supposed to put a video up today there. That was my day, but I'm, busy with other things. And so I got to make dinner here. But let me just finish this one point, and I'll get into the other comments tomorrow morning. And so, there's a time where the right wing controlled everything. And if you're a right wing person and you grew up in that era, you loved it. You're a white person growing up in, an affluent suburb or whatever. You go to church, you had a good community. America was great. And, it's the Make America Great Again that Donald Trump talked about. It was great for you. But the people running the show then, the, Edgar Hoovers and the people running the government, the shadow government on the right wing, military industrial complex, right? They were dickish to, people in the gay community, people of color, and the Kennedys, obviously, right? And back then, the Kennedys were truthers. The truthers were liberals back then. Now the truthers are conservatives. You understand this? Because the power was conservative abuse, and now the problem is liberal abuse. And you're upset because of the liberal abuse, but you've never took responsibility for the conservative abuse. So the Kennedys were truthers, and they were truthers so much so they were killed for being truthers. There's no doubt about it. They were killed by the CIA, FNA, right? And, the conservative right wing, the now neocons who RFK says in the interview are now liberals. The neocons who used to be conservative Republicans are now liberals. the neocons are now in the Liberal Party, and they're controlling things and manufacturing these wars for the military-industrial complex and writing a blank check to the pharmaceutical companies. That was shit the Republicans used to do. And if you don't own that, like as a Republican, you don't realize how Republicans used to suck and how right-wing Christians used to suck for other people, and the extreme end of your belief system and impose their will has now created the backlash that you're getting from the liberals. The force that was used by the right-wing conservative Christians is created the deviant liberal community of today, where they're forcing their beliefs on you the same way that your group forced them on them. Until you come to terms with that, you ain't a truther. You're not even sniffing the truth. You have to own your past misdeeds, going back to like colonial times, right? The abuse on the indigenous people, slavery, and these other things. I had right-wing truthers say that black people liked being slaves, right? Stupid stuff like that. So until you are willing to confront the truth of your ancestral abuse, and, again, I don't believe in paying for your ancestors' crimes. Like, I don't think that's a real thing because of past lives and other things. But in terms of the groups and the demographics and the power dynamics that are there, there's the right wing and the left wing. And for a long time, the right wing had the power, and they abused it. And now that's, now that the power has flipped, the liberals are, abusing the power that they now have in the same way. And so to say that Kennedys aren't truthers, they killed these MNFers, right? They murdered them. In terms of truthers who have been assassinated or even, come close to it or are on a list of, or whatever, imprisoned or any of these things. Very few people have, are willing to lay their life on the line, and I'm not one of them. I'm not laying my life on for this community or you all, right? Why would I do that? Like, I don't owe you anything. I certainly don't owe you my life. I don't know the government or the America or any of these, I don't know any of these institutions my life. I'm not willing to sacrifice my life, and I don't even, care that much about my life, right? My life is, inconsequential to me in various ways. But in terms of, what I'm willing to sacrifice, certainly isn't my life, isn't my freedom, any of these things. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to, put any of that on the line. But the Kennedys were. For whatever they were as a family, they're part of the power structure, all these things. But they, they fought a battle. RFK said he waged a war against the military. His uncle waged a war against the military-industrial complex and was killed for it. Then his father continued that war, and he was killed for it too. I'm not waging a war against the military-industrial complex. I'll talk about it. I'll make fun of them. I'll mock them, in a very, in a undercover, below the radar type of way, but I'm not sacrificing anything for this, right? I'm not doing that. I don't, it's not my passion. I have a higher calling. I believe it to be a higher calling, which is to let everyone know that God's within them, and connecting to God internally is the solution. It's always the solution. It's more the solution than any of these other things. Some people, their role is political. Some people, it's whatever. And that's the Kennedy's role. But to call them not truthers, and RFK, I want to end here because I got to go finish dinner. RFK Jr., he sued Monsanto and won. How is that's like as big a truther thing as there is, right? He sued Monsanto and won. And he's also sued to clean up lakes and rivers as an environmentalist. I mean, he's done things, right? People talk, like, what do you think a truther is? Somebody who talks with no consequence and just blathers about, gets emotional and waves their arms like, an Alex Jones wannabe and, does all those types of things. That's what a truther is. Somebody who gets no results and fights no battles and sacrifices nothing themselves, but gets on the internet, leaves stupid comments, and tries to keep the truth community pure because they're so much better than everybody else. That's a truther, right? Like, what do you think a truther is? Like, I mean, in terms of somebody who sees that there was systemic abuse and fights against it, and RFK won. He won, and he has been. I mean, he's the foremost expert on the link between boop and autism, right? And the, mercury and things like this. He sued people and won. He sued Fauci, and Fauci had to, basically say he didn't have the documentation, right? Fauci had, claimed that he had documentations that he didn't have to back up his side of the thing. He's won these things, right? He's litigated these things. And again, he's a lawyer. That's what he does. But to say he's not a truther, that somehow you're better than him because what? He came from a rich family that sacrificed for their political beliefs, right? I mean, Kennedy could have taken a deal, right? And I don't, I've made videos about Kennedy and there's some weird stuff. And remember, he wore the same bathing suit as one of his pals, and they seemed to have some sort of, sexual relationship. One of his buddies who was, who was an openly gay guy or whatever. I mean, I did videos about this, right? I did videos about, Kennedy stuff and, all these things. But he was murdered for something, right? You think he was murdered for being a shill, for being a good guy, for being a soldier in the beast? Or did he oppose the beastly system, a system that you claim to be a truther in? He posed in such a way that they had to kill him to get rid of him. You think that's what happened there? So he's not a truther? His brother wasn't a truther, and their nephew, who's more than likely going to be killed himself, who's, speaking truth about all these subjects that, many people in the truth community care about, but he's not a truther. He's not good enough for you. Why? Because he used to be a liberal or comes from a Democratic family. He's not good enough. He's not, he doesn't pass the smell test for you. Again, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I don't believe that a politician can change this, and I believe the best thing for us in terms of our spiritual sense, our spiritual essence, the best thing for the future generations is for this abomination of a system to end, right? And I don't think it can be fixed, and I pretty much know it can't be fixed, at least for myself. I can't prove it to you, but I've made this perfectly clear. But this guy is doing what he thinks is right, and his family has done this in, various levels. Ted Kennedy was maybe the exception. He seemed to be very seedy MNFer, right? And maybe this guy's, got a dark side. I don't know. But as far as a politician goes, a professional politician, somebody who could legitimately run for president, he's as much of a truther as you could have, right? Whether we agree with him on everything, that's, neither here nor there. And I'll get into more of this stuff tomorrow. I also want to get into the Trump stuff, but my voice is starting to go and I got to make dinner. So I'll continue on tomorrow. Okay, so it's later on the third evening, or nighttime, it's 10 o'clock. And I'll be getting ready to go to bed in a little bit. But I just had a few more thoughts. Had dinner. My wife and I went for a walk. And I want to cover the rest of the comments because there's still another 3 or 4 comments or 5 comments to go. And it's interesting what people's prejudice will keep them from opening up to something new. But before that, I just want to talk about the futility of our situation. That, for me personally, I know the system's going to collapse. And I'm participating in the system nevertheless. And it should collapse, right? If you watch a movie and you see that these characters don't deserve a second chance or a 4th chance or a 100th chance, and they get one, and it just doesn't set right. It doesn't feel right because the characters deserve something bad, right? So the way that the TV show Succession ended and the way that the TV show Ozark ended were very dissatisfying. The family in Ozark became a power family like the Succession family was at the beginning of Succession. And they did all these horrible things and became horrible people to reach that level of power. And I could tell with both shows were excellent shows and realistic shows, and there was no way for them to give you a happy ending. And that's the same thing for our country. There's a comment. Well, let me just read this one comment here. Let me see if I can find it. Here, I found the comment here. The person writes, Paul, you've been staring at the beast too long. The worst of this world will be destroyed, while the best will remain and will be better in the end. We will survive the winter. Now, I'm not sure what the person means by this, but there's going to be a difficult period of time lasting, I think, maybe 200 years at the least, maybe much longer than that. So if you think the best of the world is the abundance or, your lifestyle or fresh water or clean air or non-radioactive, vegetables, fruits, and foods, and the species in abundance, and being able to go outside and not wear a gas mask or whatever it might be, right? If you think that's the best, well then, But if you think that all these good things that you enjoy are the best, and that the bad people will be destroyed without destroying the good people and everything else, we've already, nuked the planet in ways you don't even know about. There's things that have been done to the planet that we're just beginning to feel the repercussions from. But that's, just wishful thinking. Like, there's consequences for everything that we participated in. And we all participated in. It's a demonic system, and we participated in it. And it's going to collapse at some point. And we can see it. And the more you see it, the more obvious it becomes. And I've, built a number of homesteads, and, I'm working on one right now. And, I don't have so many years left, my wife and I, and we don't know what our retirement's going to be like, or what the situation will hold, or, where the balls will bounce in terms of nuclear destruction or whatever it is, right? Whatever's going to happen. Wars and economic strife and, whatever chaos is left, and how much we have in the tank to survive it, and, a desire to do so, and how bad it'll be and how quickly it'll get there. I don't know any of those things, right? And I don't know if there's any, chance of this homestead becoming anything for somebody in the future, or other people in the future, maybe many people. I don't know. Like, I don't know if it'll be a haven for people, or it'll be just some charred piece of useless land that nothing will grow on because, some power plant went off, or, whatever it might be. And so that doesn't matter. Like, what I need to do today, I do today. You just keep on chugging along and doing what you're supposed to do. And, you have hope that maybe some of the seeds that you planted, some of the things that you've done, has some recourse in the future. But I know that, there's no way of saving the system, but there are going to be parts of the world that are going to be, better than others, and there's going to be safe havens and pockets of the future. That's what this channel is all about, and the pockets of the future will endure and, push through. And then, what Babaji had predicted in the the Whispers of the Brighter World, these teachings in my spiritual tradition, there'll be a spiritual renaissance and a human being that's much more evolved, a civilization of saints. And that's what I'm hoping for, and I believe that's possible. It doesn't look great now, but you keep on doing what you're going to do, right? And there's parts of the Joe Rogan interview with RFK Jr. And he, was talking a little bit about being fatalistic, and how his father, after his brother, the president, was murdered, had a moment of loss of faith, right? That he, they were Catholics and all this. And, just questioning God, all these things are just, and he was just depressed and really was unmotivated. But then he read some book about, again, I'm not getting exactly right, but he read some book in which there was a plague, and pretty much everyone who got the plague died. And there was a doctor who was in his house, and, there's a, inner monologue, I guess, and the guy was giving himself all the reasons why he should just stay in, why he should not go out and die. Because if he went and cared for patients, he would die. It was like death sentence. And so he might as well wait it out, and there wasn't anything he could do for the patients. And so, he was, trying to convince himself to stay in the house and not do what he was trained to do. But at some point he went out and he comforted the patients who were dying, because that was his job, even though he knew it was going to kill himself. And then he, segued into that philosophical story, and I forget who the guy was, the guy who pushes the boulder up the hill only for the boulder to roll back down every day. It never quite get the boulder up to the top of the hill. And, he was making these references to his own situation, right? Why he's still running for president when everything's so bleak and all these things. And, some people's job is something else, right? Each person has to decide what they're supposed to do. My dealing with what's going on and you're dealing with what's going on is different. And I can tell you that there's no happy endings here. There's no solution. There's no make America great again. Well, there's none of these things. You can believe what you want to believe, whatever has to help you psychologically get through. I could be happy living in the moment and why we still have a system and I still have, a tractor to drive and, a microphone to talk into and, do the things I'm doing because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'll do it until I have to do something else or I can't do this anymore or whatever. But that's, my assignment and I'm, this is what I believe I'm doing to contribute and, I'm happy to do it. And, whether the civilization collapses, I could die tomorrow, whatever. Who knows what's going to happen, right? And you keep on going, you keep on doing what you're supposed to be doing. You get to a certain age and, you realize that your mortality's coming one way or another in the near future. But having said that, there's a pathway to victory for RFK that Trump doesn't have and DeSantis and nobody else has. Jojo Magoo doesn't have it. And I'm not saying he's going to become president. He's going to do all these things and, he's going to clean up and make the world. It's just, whatever. If he could do all those things, we're talking about trillions of dollars of scammers, scam money and scammers and him disrupting their ability to scam. And a history, a family curse type of thing where there's been numerous members of his family murdered for political reasons and his, uncle and his father amongst them, right? And just a family that seems to be cursed and all these other things. If this is a TV show, that's, the headline, that's where this thing is going, right? Because he wants to take on the same criminals who are much more powerful when that his, father and his uncle were killed for at a time when people are pacified. But there's something interesting about that. There's something interesting about him as a person and compelling. There's something charismatic about him, even with his raspy voice and these other things. If you listen to him and you listen to these interviews, and again, if you can't see the difference between him and Trump, well then, why are you watching my videos? I don't, there's a sincerity that he has that Trump simply doesn't have, right? Trump is a Tino, right? A truther in name only. Trump wants to be praised. He wants people to pay for his stuff. He wants to, he thinks of himself as a king and whatever. It's the POS. And he said on the Joe Rogan interview that his main purpose as president is that there has been corruption of these agencies. He talked about the war in the Ukraine and how like 130 billion, 110 billion, whatever it was, dollars has been spent, and the CDC's budget is $12 billion. And all these, all these institutions, the CDC, the EPA, all these governmental institutions are now performing for the corporations they're supposed to police. The pharmaceutical companies run the CDC and the NIH, and just all the way down. These corporations run the Environmental Protection Agency. The bankers run the FCC. All these different things, right? So he said that he knows who the people are that are causing the problem, and who he could replace them with to correct the corruption, get the corruption out of these agencies. And I don't think he could do it, but I know that he knows it better than, and sincerely. He's not looking at these things and saying, I want to break the swamp. He's talking to adults and smart people. Like smart people can watch JFK and say, yeah, this guy makes sense, right? He's sincere and he has a history of doing this he's litigated these things. He's got, good political bones. His family has produced all these, politically minded. They have the money and the education, the connections, and all these things, right? And For me, I don't care about any of that. But I would like to see this thing play out because it's part of the show. And it's just how I view things and look at things. And I would love to see Jojo Magoo get beat in the Democratic primary, to get completely punked as president. I don't know how many presidents, some presidents don't win a second term, but most presidents get a chance to run as their party's leader. And if he got punked and lost in this primary, that would be epic. And the whole, Obama, Clinton, that whole era would die miserably, right? These new neocons and these, corporate shills, these, New World Order, military-industrial complex shills. And there's a pathway for this because in some bizarre reality, the far right-wing truthers, people on the right wing and truthers and people who are considered extremists, find JFK compelling. And he agrees with so much that we believe in. And the Bernie Sanders liberals also like him because of his stance on the environment. And many of those people they have their own issues with, Biden and the centrist Democrats. They feel like they've been screwed in the past. Bernie got cheated twice when he should have won the nomination both times. And so both extremes would vote for this guy. And there'd certainly be independents. And he could get, a number of Republicans that would vote for him. A lot of Republicans are finding his candidacy compelling. And so Biden is, being a pussy and not debating him, right? And which is, just what Biden kind of does. And, he can't because he's got no brain. He's just a mess. And he's not even going to put his name on the ballot in New Hampshire. He's just giving that to JFK, to RFK. And, they're going to try to rig this thing, which is part of the story. Let me get to that later. But if RFK wins New Hampshire and somehow he wins Iowa, I think the next state is South Carolina. And if you remember what happened with Joe Magoo, he only got 20% of he was only around 25% at the highest, and he averaged about 20% of the vote. And that's where Kennedy is now. And all the other candidates had less, and there's a lot of undecideds. But then when New Hampshire and Iowa rolled around, he got spanked, and he was fifth in one state and fourth in the other. Bernie Sanders won one, and Pete Buttigieg won another. But Pete Buttigieg ran out of money, so he was done after New Hampshire. And Clyburn came in and said, all right, I'm going to save your candidacy. And he rallied his forces in South Carolina, and he got out a lot of the African-American vote to save Jojo Magoo's candidacy. So Jojo won in South Carolina, and Clyburn came out and said, you got to be better. Your campaign sucks. I mean, he said this publicly. And, all these Democratic officials came out and they said, there's no way Bernie Sanders is going to win. And so they made a deal with Klobuchar and Buttigieg to drop out. There was Super Tuesday was coming. It was like 10 states. And they supported Jojo Magoo because they both got, some sort of a deal. Buttigieg is now transportation secretary. He was promised something. Lizzie Warren, who was the other socialist, the other hyper-liberal, who was running on Bernie Sanders' platform, stayed in and split his vote. And, they just came out, senators, and these people said, no, we're gonna make sure that Joe Biden, that Bernie Sanders doesn't win, Joe Biden does. And they just rigged it right in front of everybody. After rigging it, where Donna Brazile came out, when Hillary Clinton, she bailed out the DNC that was $12 million in debt because of Obama, he overspent his candidacy. And so she paid them $12 million and basically bought the nomination. And Nancy, whatever her name is, Wasserman Schultz, whatever her first name is, don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. She got fired and disgraced, remember that. And they put in Donna Brazile, who came in and saw all this and wrote a letter and then wrote a book about writing a letter and having a conversation with Bernie and saying, yeah, they rigged it against you. She got, the questions to the debates and got favorable treatment in all the primaries, and Bernie almost still beat her. So Bernie got screwed, and the Bernie Sanders people know this. And they really like RFK, right? They like the family, they like the history. Plus, JFK and Bobby Kennedy were heroes of Biden. At least that's what he'd tell you, right? These were legends in the Democratic Party. So screwing over RFK is a lot bit different than screwing over Bernie Sanders. And so this will fracture the liberal party, right? I mean, you could have, and plus you might have Republicans who will cross the aisle and register as Democrats so they can vote in the primary so they can get RFK to win. This is already happening. People are talking about this. And so, that'll drive the Democrats crazy if RFK is beating Joe Biden because Republicans are voting for him in their primary. I mean, think how ballistic they'll go. If they rig that in front of everybody, or they kill him or something, the internet's here and it'll be completely different than anything else. I mean, the Democratic Party would be fractured, and then all this talk about how they love elections and respect elections because, they're not election deniers like Trump will fall apart. And it would be great to watch. I mean, I'd love to watch this stuff. I mean, no matter how it plays out, if there's a serious run between RFK and Biden, it's going to expose so many different things, corruption and whatever it is. And so, if you really think that, I mean, you got to get over your personal prejudice towards Democrats and liberals and, see that RFK is like the real deal and whatever that means. I don't think he's going to change anything, but he's a compelling figure and he'll be a great addition. Or you could, vote for tired old Trump fish boy or, fake Santis, or Jabba the Chris Christie. You could do any of those things, right? And just another tired old primary Republicans that's already, jumped the shark. And we know that, Trump's support is limited. Him and DeSantis are locked into the Trumpers, and people are just over Trump and even, tired. They're all tired of him. Fox News is even, giving up on him. The New York Post and Murdoch and all these Republican publications, the whole Republican Party establishment is trying to, cleanse themselves of Trump. And then they have just a bunch of, worthless candidates that nobody wants to see. And so you could, go vote in those primaries and go back on your, smoke your hopium, or you can go and watch something interesting happen and throw your support and screw the Democrats. If you hate Joe Biden so much, like all you guys are Joe Biden haters and you just think he's going to destroy the country, you have a much better chance of doing that with getting rid of him with Kennedy than having another, questionable election with Trump, who may end up in jail in the middle of the, in the election itself and cause the constitutional crisis. And, that'd be interesting. I mean, I'm not opposed to seeing that. But, it's not for you guys who so desperately think you got to get rid of Biden. And you could clip his nuts right now by, going to these red states where it's majority of Republicans and rallying the Republicans to switch over and become either independents in some states or register as Democrats and vote for RFK over Biden and just clip his nuts right off the bat. And it would really, put the nails in the coffin of the Democratic Party, which wouldn't recover from this, right? Whatever, evil that would come out of this, if they murdered RFK, it would be the Democrats doing it and not the establishment Republicans and the conservatives. RFK and Bobby were murdered by the Republicans. RFK would be murdered by the Democrats now. Like that's the switch here. I mean, and everyone would see it, and it would be as hard as people, as much as people are in denial, that would be hard to deny. And I'm not rooting for any of this stuff. I mean, what I'm rooting for is I want to see the Democrats and the liberals get humiliated. The mainstream media, the Rachel Maddows, I just want to see them all, back on their heels. And again, they're calling RFK a conspiracy theorist, and they think he's a truther. And having a conspiracy theorist elected, and them all having it'd be much different than Trump, because this is a real serious, intellectual giant who's mature and like an adult, right? And and a litigator, and I mean, who knows how this could play out? But it'd be interesting, and I'm all for it. All right, let me. I'm going to go to bed now, but I'll get to the rest of the comments in the morning. Okay, so it is the 4th of July. We got things going. It's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I want to put this video out. I did most of it yesterday. And continuing from where I left off, I'm going to get to a couple more comments. But I wanted to just say this, and I might be a little bit repetitive here because I can't remember everything that I said yesterday. I was a little bit fired up. More so yesterday. I'm more relaxed. I've been doing the gratefulness meditation sittings today. And I've done 2 already, and I'm going to do a third one for a video series, that 3-in-1 day series I'm putting out. And it's just the second sitting was really blissful. So it's a good way to spend the 4th of July. My wife and I were doing that project outside making bone sauce, and it was really hot, and those sort of things. But anyways, what I want to say is RFK is the most compelling. He's the Trump, the way Trump was in 2016. He's the energy in the, the political show here, just like Trump was. Like, he's the star of the show. Trump is fading, right? His storyline's coming to an end, and I don't know how it's going to end, but it's just kind of pathetic, and there isn't really anybody. There's Trump Jr. and DeSantis, Trump wannabe, and then there's the anti-Trump other Republicans, and there's JoJo Magoo, who can barely make it to the finish line, right? Just trying to prop him up like he's, Weekend at Bernie's type of thing. And Kamala sucks, right? They don't have somebody that, that would be like a rock star in the Democratic Party. And Bernie Sanders is gone. He was the energy in the Democratic Party before. But RFK is unique in various ways. And he said on Joe Rogan, I'm conflating these two, videos my wife and I watched. But he said on Joe Rogan that he isn't counting on the mainstream media. He's not trying to win them over and press them. And he said, that Tucker Carlson got so many views, and, his views were 10 times what CNN was. And that Joe Rogan got 40 million views, like on a bad day, or whatever it was, something crazy like that. And he said, he's 10 times what Tucker Carlson is. And so he's clearly making the circuit on the internet and understands that the internet's the way to reach. He said the older people watch the news, his generation, to some extent my generation, or, whatever the differences are. He's a boomer, I guess, right? And he understands that nobody watches the news. And they can do as many hit pieces. I mean, even, I was saying that Bill Maher was pointing out conspiracy theories and things like this, right? But what he said, and I think I talked about this last night, was that, he was going after the corruption. And I don't think he can do it. And I'd be stunned if he won and survived. I mean, who knows how this is going to play out, but it's interesting. Like, there's a lot of unknowns. This is something new we haven't seen. We haven't seen a Democrat who's done an excellent job in the environment, and someone who was, considered maybe ultra-liberal, and he's embracing the, various truther narratives. I mean, he's been a part of that for a long time, things that are fundamental building blocks of the truth community. So he's got both of these extreme and passionate groups because, right-wing truther-type people and left-wing liberals are the most activated. The extremists are always the ones that bring, the people on the extreme ends are the ones that bring the energy. And there's a lot of energy. He knows how to use the internet. He's making his rounds on the internet. And Bill Maher said something like, the New York Times did a hit piece, and he said, whatever he said about the hit piece. You read some of it, and RFK said, well, at least they're talking about me. Like, before they were just ignoring him, trying to, hope he went away. But they now know that they have to deal with him because he has 20% of the vote, and Joe Biden had 20% of the vote at this time last year, and he was wandering into the crowd and challenging people to push-up contests and losing it and pooping in into his Depends and sniffing women. He was JoJo Magoo. And, he had 20% just on name recognition. And Kennedy is the lone challenger to Biden. That's what the primary is. And what they're trying to do is get rid of Iowa altogether My wife just told me this, and I've known this for a while. Biden wants to make South Carolina, the DNC wants to make that the first primary, even though South Carolina is a Republican state. Iowa is Republican, but New Hampshire is usually Democrat. And they want to make the Republican state the first in the primary. And that was the state that saved Joe Biden last time, which I said, right? And because he was getting the Obama vote and Clyburn got out the African American community. But if there were enough Republican crossovers to vote in South Carolina, which could totally happen, Biden might get a stunning loss there. And then he'd have to come out and campaign and debate, and that would be wonderful. I mean, it would be him getting embarrassed, and they would have to openly rig it. It would be a wonderful show, something I'd like to see. And again, if people really want to get rid of Biden, that's the best way. Don't let him even win the primary. You humiliate him in the primary, all the Biden haters, and that's all you would have to do. And so, the energy is with RFK, and you can just feel it. And like I was saying, if you listen to him, you can see there's a difference of someone who's sincerely talking and the political posturing and the pandering to the stupid. If you think if someone thinks Joe Biden, but if you think Trump's speeches are great, then you're, the bottom half of the intelligence, you're average or below average intelligence. And maybe even worse for Joe Biden, because they pander to the stupid, right? And either that or you're a cult, you've been culted and you just have cult goggles on. But either way, he's just not good. Like they're not appealing to smart people. They're not transparent. They're just, bad actors and, bad politicians. And they're trying to, pander and say what you want to hear as opposed to, being something, right? And, that might hurt Kennedy, but at least he's appealing to people's higher nature and intelligent people and people with critical thinking skills. Kennedy talks a lot about being a critical thinker. He wants people to do their own research. And so let me get back to the comments here. There's a number of comments were about my story, right? I talked about that story where it seemed like the algorithms predicted that I would need polyurethane based in whatever data they had on me or read my mind or whatever. A number of people commented they had similar experiences. Then I got a lot of people who commented demonstrating that they didn't understand my story at all. And I'll get to those comments hopefully tomorrow or the next day, 2 days from now. But I'll make my video on my other channel tomorrow. The more I learn about RFK, the more I disagree with him. He's not a real truther. Anti-boop. He booped all his kids. Constitutionalist and freedom fighter. The latest that I disagree with him is disapproval of affirmative action Supreme Court's decision in college admissions. He's not a Republican. And so he clearly is an anti-boop, or part of that is just, not being extremist and whatever. He would believe that they might work. The stuff that Joe Rogan and he said that they took is not the stuff I took for COVID. Like they took the Big I or whatever it was, and they took a lot of other medications. They're not, as anti-allopathic medicine as I am, for example, or many of you are. And so that's neither here nor there. But he's against mandates, and he's, clearly aware of the side effects and things like this, right? And so, it's whatever it is, right? Like you're not going to get that as a candidate, somebody that could win. What you're looking for, your positions. Like if you're going to look for people who just agree with you in anything in life and tell you that you're right or agree with the things you believe in, you're never going to find anybody like that. People are on their own level. They have their own, criteria, their own lens in which they view the world. What you would want, and again, I'm not even a voter. Going back to this idea that all the energy is with JFK or RFK, I wasn't interested in hearing him. My wife had talked about him on and off for the last year or so, some of the things that he had done. And, I'm just not interested in these people. I don't care about them. If I cover them here, that's one thing. But he's very compelling. And I was pretty sure I was never going to vote again. I don't believe in it. I don't even believe in it now. But I do like what the storylines that are coming together here. And I'd like to see him up more on the national stage and have an actual chance to win and these issues be debated. And people can see that there's a 40% following. Like when they say he's got a 20%, 25% following of potential Democratic voters, like where's that coming from? And that's not polling Republicans. Like who knows how many people he would get, especially if the Trumpers really realize the truth about Trump. You might see that he would get, he might pull at 40%, right? Like even now. And that would be a stunning blow to the, people behind the throne, the people in the media who are trying to call us all crazy conspiracy theorists. And they realize 40% of the people agree with him, at least, just in the beginning without even hearing him. And then as he starts talking, they see he's reasonable. The way he presents himself, he's really polished. He's got compelling stories for why he's adopted these positions and why he's passionate about the things he's passionate about. And these other guys just make things up. Like Joe Biden just plagiarizes and takes other people's stories, and he doesn't do a good job with that. He talks about kids rubbing his leg and corn pop, right? These things. Bizarre stuff. Cory Booker talks about his imaginary friend T-Bone. I mean, they're just, weird. This guy talks about, growing up as a Kennedy and the tragedy in his life and where he was when he found out his dad was killed and things like that, right? And these things that he's gone through, his family and friends of his and people that came up to him on the road and talked to him about their kids melting down after they got the boop and they got, they became autistic and all these things. He's got a compelling story, right? Reasons for why he has these positions. And he's, a good storyteller. And it'd be an interesting contrast with what we see with these other politicians. Okay, let me get to this last comment here, or maybe not the last one, maybe a couple. This one here. RFK is not an anti-boop. His stance is that we can make boobs safer. We can, as there's never been a safe boop and never will be. RFK is a huge climate change pusher and probably be for climate lockdowns and the like. No, he is, he talks about, well, let me get into this other one here. If you listen to what he says, his views are a lot more complex than these people are seeing. It says here, LMANO, LM, I spelled my last name, LMAO. You trust a must who is elitist, and now you think a guy who is also an elitist will make a difference, and he is one of the past Operation Warp Speed. Oh, don't you remember, huh? You all crazy for trusting any of them. Who said I trusted any of them? Like, this is not about trust. Well, I would say that Kennedy seems to be a reasonable person, a more balanced person, but they don't have any power. This is not about the presidency, and, it's a completely corrupt system that's imploding. There's no trust. Like, I trust that the system's going to collapse. Like, I trust, people are going to lie or whatever. This isn't about, having a quality government or having anything that resembles as something that's fair and equitable in any of these things. But anyways, there was comment that I must have deleted or not taken a screenshot of. There's a few of them that talked about him going after your guns. And that's not what he said, because YouTube recommended a video for me that said, why does RFK want to take your guns? And he said in the interview that he doesn't want to take anything, and that, he's not into that kind of politics, right? He said that if the Senate and the House passed gun control legislation, he would sign it. He wouldn't veto it. It's a lot different than being somebody like Jojo Magoo who's advocating for it. Now, he talked about on Bill Maher that when he was a kid, there was hunting clubs or rifle instruction at schools he went to. He went to these private schools, and kids would bring the guns to the schools, the rifles, right? Something Alec Baldwin, his family did. Remember, his dad was a sharpshooter. And he said that these events that are happening in schools, these tragic events, he mentioned that it's more complex than just blaming guns. He blamed psychiatric medications like Prozac and things like this, right? Things that were serotonin inhibitors. He said that there's a big correlation between that and violence. He also talked about video games and the violence in TV and things like this, right? All these other ways that there's a difference in terms of the psychological makeup and the so-called brain chemistry of younger people today. So he's not somebody who's advocating the Democratic positions. He's not saying that he's certainly not blaming guns for everything. And the way that we've seen it, the Second Amendment has held up. The NRA and the Second Amendment has held up. It's held up through Obama. It's held up through Biden. It's held up through all these Democratic presidents. And when the Democrats held the House and the Senate, it's held up. And I don't see them holding the legislative bodies. I mean, they couldn't get any of these things done for years. No matter how many events they roll out, no matter what happens, nothing changes that, right? He believes things that we believe as truthers. Maybe not exactly the same way. This take on Ukraine and the amount of money that's been spent and, the talk about CIA creating wars. I mean, his family believed this for years. These people keep on saying the Kennedys are, the number of comments I got where people said Kennedys aren't truthers. I mean, like, they died. They got killed by the so-called deep state, like I was saying earlier in my other voiceover. That's not enough for you, right? Like what more would they have to do? What do you think, they're shills? Like, what more they would have to do? With so-called deep state, what you Republicans and QBs called the deep state, was what killed the Kennedys, right? It was just a different deep state back then. It was still the same military-industrial complex and, corporate overlords and intelligence community stuff. His uncle, JFK, figured out that the CIA had one job, and that was to create as many wars to keep the military-industrial complex going as a business. And he talked about the speech. He said it's the most important speech in American history. Is Eisenhower, who was the outgoing president, had that speech he gave to talking about the military-industrial complex, which has gone around the truth community. Most of you have already seen that. And he's embraced that speech. And he said that his uncle saw what Eisenhower saw, and he was fighting against the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex until they killed him. And so that's not a truther. I mean, despite what he was as a person, that's what happened, right? He fought against the beast. He lost, but he was, sincere in his efforts. The same thing with Bobby, right? His RFK's father. So, this idea that these guys are somehow doesn't measure up to your standards as you sit there, picking popcorn out of your belly button while you're on the computer in your mom's basement, judging everybody, and that they're not up to your truther standards, right? Like, this is what I've talked about for years. Like, there's people who actually do things, and I'm not one of them. I don't respect that. I believe that. I'm not saying I don't respect it, but I don't believe that that's what you should do. I'm not an advocate. I'm not an activist. I talk about connecting to God internally as being the solution. Only spirituality will save this world. That's what I believe in. And so I laugh at the apocalypse, and I talk about a spiritual solution. But anyways, just to wrap this thing up, if you hear RFK talk, he's not like a black and white person. He's not like, a straight up liberal or straight up conservative, or he doesn't fit in these various categories. And he's a reasonable person who, he's not arrogant in his own beliefs. He knows what he's an expert in. He trusts science, and he doesn't come out and say, well, these people are evil that are doing these things. Like, he has a different view than that, right? Like, he has a more complex view of these things. Like, he doesn't, there was one point he said, I don't want to try to analyze what other people believe, like what their motivation was to do the things they did with the boop, like these, or the, CDC and these other, like, he didn't want to speculate at what they what their reasoning was, but he wanted to talk about their actions and the science behind it. So he's coming at it from a different perspective, because most people in the truth community look at the people that they believe responsible for this as the evil ones, and you're the good ones and the heroes, and that's not who he is. Like, he's not going to be like that, right? Which is a good thing, because that would not make a good president. That's what Trump is. Like, Trump thinks the people that are against him are evil, and the people that are for him are good, and that's his. I mean, he actually thinks that. You can see that. That's one of his primary beliefs, and that doesn't work as a leader, right? He's exclusionary. When you just say that everybody disagrees with you as evil or not up to your standards, then you're worthless as a person. You're not going to be effective in this world. That's why personally I don't deal with people like that. Like, I would be bumming all the time the more I interact with so-called sheeple, the harder my life is, right? And I try not to look down on them or whatever it is, but I mean, it's almost impossible not to, right? And so that doesn't make an effective leader. You have to be a leader for everybody. And, if you're going to change things through changing policy, again, I don't believe any of this stuff could happen, but you have to believe in the system. And I've had people say that I would, Paul for president or whatever, the pockets for president. And I'd make a horrible president. Like, I would, it would be bad. Like, I don't have administrative capabilities. Like, I'm not a good administrator. And I just, I'm not really into people, and I don't believe the system. We can't have somebody who believes the system is corrupt and the best thing for it is to collapse, run the system, right? Someone has to believe in America, and I think Kennedy still does. And I think these other politicians really just believe in the corruption and trying to get as much as they can out of their narcissistic pursuits, right? I think Kennedy's a true believer in America, and I don't agree with that belief. But he's even talked about it being an empire, right? Like, he realizes what happened to it. And he was talking about how there was a time in American history where everybody in the world looked up to America. They wanted American cars and American jeans, and they wanted American know-how and the leadership, and people just looked up to America as being like a beacon of light. And now, like, these countries hate America, and they're running away from it. And China is now doing what America used to do and going in and helping countries and bailing them out and sending over whatever they can, aid and things, and winning these countries over. And that's where the battle has been waged, and most Americans don't know about it, right? And so again, I don't care what you think, and you might have a completely different view, but most people are making up their minds without actually looking into this, right? Like, for me, I wasn't interested in hearing about them. People were writing comments to me. My wife was talking to me about it, and I just happened to see a couple videos that YouTube recommended, and then the next thing I know, I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and I was impressed by the potential for a storyline here in the show, and Kennedy's presentation as a person, a character in the show, and I like to see how that character arc plays out, and it's something that it's in the truthers' hands, and all these Jojo Magoo haters and Democratic haters. RFK is your solution. And if you can't get there, you can't get there. That's not my problem. But it's something you whine about all the time, people who think the Democrats are evil. And if he was the head of that party, somebody that the Democrats call a conspiracy theorist and a truther, and doing everything they can to undermine, spread disinformation about him and undermine his candidacy, and he could easily beat Jojo Magoo, and the Democratic Party would never be the same. So it's there for the taking. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pouring for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.